She learned to love him in C major. Tuesday evenings at 6, his car would pull into the driveway. A gray Honda with a dent above the rear tire that had been there so long it felt like part of his character. He'd carry in the leather satchel that smelled like sheet music and peppermint, the one with the brass clasp that clicked open in a way that meant the lesson was beginning. My daughter would be waiting at the piano already, her small hands positioned on middle C the way he'd taught her. She was 9. He was patient. Those were the facts I lived inside for nearly 2 years. The house had a particular sound on Tuesday evenings. The notes would drift from the living room into the kitchen where I'd prepare dinner, scales ascending and descending, the same measures repeated until they smoothed into something beautiful. Sometimes I'd hear his voice, low and encouraging, correcting her gently. Again, but listen for the space between the notes. That's where the music lives. I thought he was a good teacher. I thought I knew what good looked like. This isn't fiction. This is how trust breaks, one ordinary evening at a time. Before, there was order. Daniel, Mr. Rosen to my daughter, though he'd told me more than once to call him Daniel, had been teaching piano for 15 years. He came recommended by another mother at the school, someone whose son had gone on to study music in college. He's wonderful with children, she'd said. Patient, really sees them. That phrase had mattered to me then. My daughter was shy, easily discouraged. She needed someone who would see her. The lessons were supposed to last 45 minutes. They usually ran an hour, sometimes longer. Daniel would say he wanted to finish the piece properly, didn't want to leave her in the middle of a difficult passage. I appreciated his dedication. I'd offer him coffee while my daughter played, and sometimes he'd accept, standing in the kitchen doorway talking about tempo and phrasing while I sliced vegetables or wiped down counters. He had kind eyes. That's what I remember thinking. The kind that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He never asked for the extra time. He never charged for it either. My husband worked late on Tuesdays. He'd usually get home around 8:30 after Daniel had gone and our daughter was in bed. It became my evening, mine and hers, the piano time, the practicing, the slow improvement. She was getting better. Even I could hear it. The pieces grew more complex. Chopin, Debussy. Her fingers learned to find notes she couldn't have imagined reaching 6 months before. Our living room faced the street, the piano positioned near the window, where afternoon light fell across the keys in amber rectangles. Daniel always commented on it. Perfect lighting, he'd say. Musicians need good light. He'd adjust the blinds sometimes, angling them just so, explaining that glare could strain her eyes during long practice sessions. These small acts of care accumulated into trust. I trusted the way he closed the piano lid gently after each lesson. I trusted the systematic way he organized her sheet music. I trusted the encouraging notes he'd write in the margins. Beautiful, or, remember, patience, in handwriting that slanted slightly to the right. I didn't know then that this would be the last season I slept without listening for sounds I couldn't name. The first time I noticed, it was nothing. Late September. The lesson had ended around 7:15. I'd heard the final notes, heard Daniel say, "Beautiful work tonight, really beautiful." Then the usual sounds. The piano bench sliding back, footsteps, the front door opening. I was upstairs helping my son with homework, something about fractions that neither of us fully understood. 10 minutes later, I came down to start the bedtime routine. His car was still in the driveway. I stood at the window, my daughter's backpack in my hand, and looked at that gray Honda sitting there in the dusk. The porch light made shadows across its windshield. I waited. Maybe he was on the phone. Maybe he was checking something. 2 minutes. 3. The car was dark inside, no dome light, no glow from a phone screen. Just still. Then the car started, and he pulled away, the red taillights disappearing at the end of our street where the oak trees make a tunnel in summer. I never thought about it again until I had to think about everything. It happened twice more in October. The lesson would end, I'd hear it end, hear the clear sounds of conclusion, and then later, passing a window or taking out the trash, I'd see his car. Still there, engine off, just sitting in our driveway like it belonged. The second time, I was bringing in groceries. I'd parked on the street because his car occupied the driveway, and I came around the side of the house with bags cutting into my palms. He was sitting in the driver's seat, head tilted back slightly, eyes closed or nearly closed. I couldn't tell. I stood there with my arms full of milk and bread and frozen vegetables, and I watched him for maybe 30 seconds before he must have sensed me there. His head turned. He saw me. He waved, casual, friendly, started the car, and drove away. I didn't wave back. My hands were full. The third time, I mentioned it to him, casual, light. The following Tuesday, as he was packing his satchel. I noticed you stayed a while in your car last week. Everything all right? He looked up, and for just a fraction of a second, something crossed his face. Not guilt, not fear. Something closer to being caught at rest when rest wasn't allowed. Then he smiled. Oh, yes. Sorry about that. I call them decompression moments. After a full day of lessons, I sometimes need a few minutes of quiet before I drive. Is it a problem? I can park on the street if... No, I said quickly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Very kind of you to ask. He zipped the satchel closed. The brass clasp clicked. Your daughter's really coming along, by the way. The Debussy is challenging, but she's not giving up. That says something about character. She loves it, loves learning from you. I'm lucky to teach her. His eyes were still kind. The kitchen was warm. My daughter called from upstairs, needing help with something, and I left him to let himself out. I heard the front door close, heard his car start immediately this time. By the time I came back downstairs, he was gone. The difference between suspicion and certainty is paper thin. I wasn't suspicious yet, I was only aware. November brought rain. The lessons continued. My daughter was preparing for a small recital, nothing formal, just an event at the community center where a few students would perform. She practiced constantly, the same piece over and over until I could hum it in my sleep. Beethoven's Für Elise, which Daniel said was cliché, but perfect for building confidence. She'd play it before dinner, after dinner, sometimes early in the morning before school. The house filled with those descending notes until they became part of the walls. Daniel said she had real talent, that if she kept working, she could pursue music seriously one day. He'd started talking about conservatories, about summer programs for gifted students. Not yet, he'd say. But in a few years, absolutely. My daughter would glow when he said these things. She'd practice harder. She'd ask if we could extend the lessons to an hour and a half. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because my daughter's face when she played, concentrated, and almost peaceful, was something I wanted to protect. Because what parent doesn't want to hear that their child is special, chosen, seen? But the car kept staying, not every week. That's what made it easy to ignore. Some Tuesdays he'd leave right away, and I'd watch his taillights disappear before the piano bench had stopped squeaking. Others, he'd sit for 5 minutes, 10, once, nearly 20. I started noticing patterns that might not have been patterns. The nights my husband worked latest, Daniel seemed to stay longest. The nights my son had soccer practice and the house was quieter, Daniel's car remained in the driveway even after I'd turned off the porch light. I began listening differently. The end of a lesson has a particular sound, the definitive closing of the piano lid, the rustle of sheet music being gathered, the exchange of "see you next week" and "have a good night." I'd hear all of that. Then silence. Then later, the sound of a car door closing, an engine starting. What happened in between? I'd ask my daughter what she was doing in those minutes. Just putting my books away, she'd say, or just getting water, or just looking at the next piece. Her answers were ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of things children do. But the math didn't work. Putting books away took 30 seconds, getting water, maybe a minute, looking at the next piece, 2 minutes at most, and yet the car would stay for 10, 15, 20. Where was she during that extra time? Where was he? I asked my daughter once, carefully. We were in the kitchen together making hot chocolate, the kind with real cocoa powder that takes patience to stir smooth. She was stirring, watching the brown swirl into the milk, watching marshmallows dissolve into foam. Does Mr. Rosen ever stay after lessons? Talk to you about anything besides piano? She didn't look up. Sometimes. Just about school and stuff. What kind of stuff? She shrugged, the spoon making circles. Like, how's school going? Do I like my teachers? Normal things? He's nice, Mom. He tells me about when he was learning piano. He said he used to hate practicing too. Do you hate practicing? Sometimes. But he makes it better. He says everyone struggles, and that's how you know you're learning something real. Does he ever? I paused, trying to find words that wouldn't scare her, wouldn't plant ideas that weren't there. Does he ever make you uncomfortable? Now she looked at me. What do you mean? I just mean, does he ever do or say anything that feels strange? No. She went back to her hot chocolate. He's really nice. He says I'm one of his best students. Something in my chest tightened. That's wonderful. He said if I keep improving, he might invite me to play at a real concert, like with other musicians, adults and everything. That would be something. She smiled at me, chocolate on her upper lip, and went back to her homework. She was fine. She was happy. I was the one with the problem, the one who was starting to see shadows where there was only ordinary kindness, but I couldn't stop listening for the sound of his car. By December, I was watching the clock. Lesson starts at 6, ends around 7, 7:15 at the latest. Then I'd position myself somewhere I could see the driveway without being obvious. The bathroom window upstairs had the best view. I could stand there pretending to fold towels and watch through the frosted glass. The front hall worked too if I stood behind the coat rack. Once I stood in the dark garage, looking through the small window in the side door, my breath making clouds in the cold air. His car stayed 17 minutes past the end of the lesson. I counted. 1001, 1002, the way they teach children to measure seconds. I counted to 1020, which meant 17 minutes, and only then did his car finally start. When it finally left, I went back inside and found my daughter already in her pajamas, brushing her teeth in the upstairs bathroom. Her sheet music was stacked neatly on the piano. Her glass of water sat on the side table where she always left it. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. I was losing my mind over a man sitting in his car. My husband didn't understand when I tried to explain it. We were getting ready for bed, that quiet time when the day finally ends and honesty has room to exist. Maybe he's tired, he said, pulling off his socks. Maybe he's making calls. What exactly are you worried about? I didn't know how to answer, that the pattern felt wrong, that the length of the pauses was increasing, that kindness could be a door left deliberately open. You think he's doing something to her? My husband's voice was careful, the kind of careful that means he's trying not to say what he's thinking. No, I don't know. She seems fine. Has she said anything? Anything at all that seems off? No. Then maybe you're seeing something that isn't there. Maybe I was. Probably I was. But the fear once planted grew in the dark spaces between certainty and doubt. It grew roots. It grew branches. It became the tree I lived under. I started staying in the living room during lessons. Not the kitchen, not upstairs. I'd sit on the couch with a book I wasn't reading, pretending to give them space while remaining close enough to hear everything. My daughter had asked me once why I was always in the living room now. I like listening, I told her. It's peaceful. She'd accepted this without question. Children do that. Accept the changes adults make without asking why. The lessons sounded exactly as they always had. His voice, patient and instructive. Her playing, improving steadily. Sometimes he'd demonstrate a passage, his hands moving over the keys with a fluidity she was learning to imitate. The piano bench would creak as he sat beside her. Watch my left hand here, he'd say. See how it stays loose? Tension kills music. Sometimes they'd laugh at a mistake. Sometimes he'd tell her stories about famous pianists, about Clara Schumann or Glenn Gould, people I'd never heard of but whose names my daughter now knew by heart. Nothing felt wrong when I could hear it. It was only after, in the silence and the waiting, that wrong had space to exist. The Tuesday before Christmas, my husband came home early. 8 o'clock instead of 8:30. He'd left work in the middle of a meeting, told them it was a family emergency. There was no emergency, only the need to see for himself what I'd been describing. Daniel was still in the driveway. My husband pulled in behind him, blocking him in, and Daniel immediately started his car and left. They passed each other, my husband walking up to the house as Daniel backed out, and Daniel waved, friendly, normal. My husband didn't wave back. That was weird timing, my husband said, setting down his briefcase in the front hall. He does that sometimes. Sits there. For how long? 20 minutes tonight. My husband looked at me and I saw my own uncertainty reflected back. That's a long time to sit in a car. I know. Did you ask him about it? Once. He said he needs decompression time. Decompression. My husband repeated the word like it was a foreign language. From teaching a 9-year-old piano? That's what he said. We stood there in the front hall, both of us not saying the thing we were thinking. The Christmas tree blinked in the corner of the living room, colored lights reflecting off the piano's polished surface. Then my daughter came downstairs, asking if she could have cookies, and the moment dissolved into the ordinary machinery of bedtime and forgetting. But neither of us forgot. January. The lessons resumed after holiday break. My daughter had gotten a new piano book for Christmas, more advanced pieces that would take months to learn. Brahms, Schubert, songs without words that somehow said everything. Daniel was pleased with her progress, told me she could probably pass a grade 6 exam by summer if she wanted. She's really something special, he said, packing his satchel in the front hall, while my daughter ran upstairs to get ready for bed. You should be very proud. We are. He zipped the satchel slowly. I was thinking, there's a summer intensive program. 2 weeks. The instructors are incredible. I think she'd benefit enormously. That's something we'd have to discuss. Of course. I have brochures in the car. Would you like me to? Maybe next week. Sure. He smiled. See you next week. I watched him walk to his car, watched him get in, watched him sit there without starting the engine. The January night was clear and cold, stars visible above the neighbor's roof. I put my daughter to bed, read her a story about a girl who could play music that made flowers grow, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, turned out the light. When I came back downstairs 25 minutes later, his car was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to my husband in the dark and tried to name what I was feeling. Fear, yes, but also shame. Shame for doubting, shame for not acting, shame for not knowing whether there was anything to act on, shame for the possibility that I was destroying something innocent with my suspicion. What if I'm wrong? I whispered. What if you're right? He whispered back. The space between those two questions was where we lived now. We decided together, quietly, that the lessons would end. Not abruptly, not with accusations, just a gradual phasing out. We'd tell Daniel that our daughter wanted to try a different instrument, or that the timing wasn't working anymore, or any of the dozens of polite lies people tell to exit situations gracefully. But we needed to know first if there was anything to be afraid of. My husband suggested we talk to her together, gently. Create a space where she could tell us if something was wrong. We chose a Saturday afternoon, the kind of unhurried time when hard conversations can happen without feeling forced. The winter light came through the windows at a low angle, making the dust visible in the air. We sat with her in the living room, the piano silent behind us like a witness. We want to talk to you about your piano lessons, my husband began. She looked between us, suddenly wary. Why? Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, not at all. We just want to make sure you're happy, that you feel comfortable with Mr. Rosen. I do. Has he ever made you feel uncomfortable? I asked. Even a little bit? Her face scrunched in confusion. No, he's really nice. Why are you asking this? We asked every version of the question we could think of, carefully, lovingly, never suggesting what answer we feared. Had he ever touched her inappropriately? No. Had he ever said things that felt strange? No. Had she ever felt scared? No. Did she want to keep taking lessons? Yes. Had he ever asked her to keep secrets? No. Had he ever given her gifts? Only the journal, which she showed us, a simple notebook, nothing expensive, nothing weird. Had he ever seemed angry? Never. Sad? Sometimes, but not in a scary way. Just thoughtful. She started to cry, thinking we were taking piano away from her. I love piano. I love learning. Please don't make me stop. I'm getting so good. I don't want to quit. We held her and promised we wouldn't, but something in me knew the lessons were already over. You can't unknow a fear once it's been named. You can't unhear silence once you've learned to count it. The next Tuesday, I stayed in the living room again, watching, listening. The lesson proceeded normally until the end. Daniel closed the piano lid, began gathering his materials. Then he paused. Before I go, he said to my daughter, I wanted to give you something. I stood up from the couch. He pulled a small book from his satchel. It's a journal for writing about music, what pieces make you feel, what you want to learn next. I give them to students who I think are really serious about their art. My daughter took it, delighted. Thank you. You're welcome. There are some prompts in the back, questions about music and emotion. I think you'll enjoy them. She flipped through the pages, excited. I hope that's all right, he said, looking at me now. It's nothing expensive. That's very kind, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like someone performing calmness. He left. I waited. His car stayed. This time I walked outside. The January air was sharp enough to burn in my lungs. I could see my breath. The driveway was dark except for the small light above our garage door, a yellow circle that made the rest of the world seem darker by comparison. I walked to the driver's side of his car and tapped on the window with my knuckle. 2 knocks, neither soft nor hard. He rolled it down. Oh, hi. Everything okay? That's what I wanted to ask you. He looked genuinely confused. I'm sorry. You sit in your car after lessons, every week, sometimes for 20 minutes or more. I need to know why. His face changed. Not guilty, not defensive. Something else. Something like sadness mixing with resignation. Like he'd been waiting for this conversation and dreading it in equal measure. Can I be honest with you? Please. He was quiet for a long moment. I could hear the engine of someone else's car far away, could hear the wind moving through the bare branches of the oak tree in our front yard, could hear my own heartbeat. I'm going through a divorce, he finally said. Have been for about 6 months. I'm living in my brother's spare room. He's got 3 kids under 7. They're good kids, loud, kind, everywhere. I love them, but... He stopped, looked at his hands on the steering wheel. Your house is quiet. Your daughter is talented. When I leave here, I feel like I've done something good, something that matters. And then I sit in the car because I don't want to go back yet. To the noise, to the lawyers, to all of it. I just need a few minutes of... He laughed, but it wasn't happy. It was the laugh people make when they realize how pathetic something sounds out loud. Of nothing, of quiet, of feeling like a teacher instead of a failure. I stood there, frozen. I didn't know. I don't advertise it. I'm sorry. I should have realized how it might look. A man sitting in his car outside someone's house. Jesus, I'm sorry. I'll stop. I'll leave right away from now on. Daniel, it's fine. I understand, really. He started the engine. See you next week. Wait. But he was already backing out, the red taillights illuminating the street, then gone. I stood in the driveway for a long time after he left. The cold worked its way through my sweater. I thought about my marriage. Solid, intact, boring, in all the best ways. I thought about what it might feel like to lose that. To be 43 years old and living in someone else's spare room, measuring your worth by the progress of other people's children. I told my husband everything. We sat at the kitchen table until midnight, talking in circles. Was he telling the truth? It sounded true. But didn't everything sound true when spoken with enough sincerity? Should we keep letting him teach our daughter? Should we trust our instincts or our guilt? What were we protecting her from? Danger or our own fear? And if it was only fear, what were we teaching her about trust? I don't know, my husband said finally. I genuinely don't know. We called him the next day. I rehearsed what I would say, practiced the lie about trying a different instrument, made my voice calm. He answered on the 3rd ring. Daniel, it's Sarah. I wanted to talk about the lessons. Of course. We've decided. My daughter wants to try guitar for a while. She's interested in different styles of music. We're going to take a break from piano. The silence on the other end lasted long enough for me to count my heartbeats. 5, 6, 7. I see, he said finally. It's nothing you did. She's loved learning from you. I appreciate you saying that. His voice was professional, distant. Tell her she's welcome to return any time. And please, tell her to keep practicing. She's talented. Really talented. I will. Take care, Sarah. The line went dead. My daughter was devastated. She cried. She begged. She said we were ruining her life. We let her be devastated. We didn't tell her why we'd really stopped. We just kept saying she could try guitar, that change was good, that she'd thank us later. the lies parents tell their children to protect them from truths they can't explain. 3 months later, I saw him at the grocery store. He was with a woman and 2 children who looked about 7 and 5. They were laughing about something, tossing things into the cart with easy affection. A box of crackers, bananas, ice cream. The kids were calling him Uncle Daniel. The woman had her hand on the cart, a wedding ring visible. His sister-in-law, I realized. His brother's family, the life he'd described. He saw me and waved, friendly, no resentment. I waved back. That night, I found the piano journal he'd given my daughter. She'd written in it twice, then abandoned it like children abandon things that remind them of loss. The first entry said, "Today I learned the first page of Claire de Lune. Mr. Rosen says it's one of the most beautiful pieces ever written. I think he's right." The second entry, dated 2 weeks later, just said, "I miss piano." I flipped through the rest of the book. The prompts he'd mentioned were in the back. Questions like, "What does music make you feel?" and "If you could play any piece perfectly, what would it be?" Simple questions, kind questions, the questions of someone who cared about teaching. I don't know if I made the right choice. I don't know if there was a right choice. I know that I felt something shift in the air, that patterns emerged, that I couldn't ignore, that love for my child made me see danger where danger might not have existed. Or maybe did. Maybe almost did. Maybe was about to. Or maybe was never there at all. We never went back. My daughter doesn't play piano anymore. She tried guitar for 3 months, then quit. Said it wasn't the same. She's in middle school now, doing fine, focused on soccer and her friends. Sometimes she asks why we stopped with Mr. Rosen. I tell her the same lie, and she accepts it the way teenagers accept things that don't quite make sense, but aren't worth fighting over. She doesn't remember the music anymore. I do. I drive past his street sometimes when I'm running errands. His car isn't there. He moved, I heard through the mother who'd recommended him, to a different part of town after his divorce finalized, closer to the high school where he teaches during the day. She said he seems happier. She said her son still takes lessons from him. She said he asks about my daughter sometimes, hopes she's still playing. I wonder if he still sits in his car after lessons. I wonder if he found another driveway, another quiet moment, another house where he could pause before returning to whatever waited for him. I wonder if he thinks about us. I wonder if he knows that I spent hours, days, weeks turning over every interaction, looking for proof of something I never found. Trust doesn't die loudly. It dies in the quiet space between what we see and what we fear. It dies in driveways, in waiting, in the terrible arithmetic of counting minutes and finding them excessive. It dies when kindness starts to look like something else, even if it never was. It dies when we choose safety over faith, when protection feels like survival, when we look at ordinary sadness and see only threat. I will never know if I saved my daughter or simply taught her that love means suspicion, that safety requires distance, that the world is dangerous in ways we can't always name, that people who seem kind might be hiding something or might just be hiding their own quiet pain in the only way they know how. What I know is this: his car stayed too long, and I stopped waiting to understand why. I chose the fear over the man, the shadow over the light, the terrible possibility over the innocent explanation. Maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong. Maybe right and wrong don't matter when you're trying to protect the thing you love most in the world. Some nights, late, when the house is quiet, I can still hear her playing. The Debussy, the Beethoven, the Brahms she never got to learn. The music she might have made if I'd been brave enough to trust a sad man sitting in his car, collecting quiet moments before returning to a life that had fallen apart. She learned to love him in C major. I taught her to forget him in silence.